to them. There'll be time at the end for questions as well. So definitely there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions. And we will have a copy of this recording available for anyone, for you to share with people you know, or if you want to go back and look at any of the slides. But everyone is muted, so we would appreciate it if you stay muted during the talk. So use the chat function for sure if you do have questions during the talk, and we will answer questions at the end. So thanks. What we thought we'd do with this presentation is start out by just talking about chimney swifts in general. I will do the first part of the presentation talking about chimney swift biology, natural history, some of the population trends, and then Ray is going to talk about what the efforts that we're doing in Vermont here to monitor and determine some of the important nesting and roosting habitat in the state. Just to give you a little bit of info on chimney swifts, they were originally a species that nested in the forests of the United States, or the eastern United States, but with the clearing of the land here, they lost their habitat. They would nest in hollow trees, and with the clearing of the land, they lost their habitat, so they started to use human-made structures for nesting and roosting. So you'll see in this picture, there's a number of chimney swifts in a chimney. They started to use chimneys, and that's how they got their name, obviously. Let's go to the next slide. So chimney swifts are, they belong to a group of aerial insectivores. What we call aerial insectivores because they eat insects out of the air. And they are in a family, there's a family of swifts called Apodidae, which is derived from a Greek word meaning footless. Even though they do have feet, it refers to their small, weak legs of these birds. There are 4 swift species in the United States. Chimney swift is the only one in the east. The others are called black swift, Bose swift, and white-throated swift. And they are in the same group as nightjars, which are whippoorwills and nighthawks and things like that, and hummingbirds. Let's go to the next slide. So chimney swift, as I said, is the only swift in the east. You can see from the map in this picture, their range is pretty much the entire eastern United States. They are a long distance migrant. They will migrate as far as the Amazon basin of Peru, northern Chile, and northwestern Brazil. They migrate in flocks, usually by day, which is sort of an interesting fact because a lot of songbirds migrate at night. But they are a long distance migrant. They're relatively widespread, as you can see from the map as well, in the eastern US. And up here in the northern part of their range, where we have not too many swifts north of us, they tend to sort of gather into larger and larger groups as they move further south during migration. So the birds from Canada might join our swifts here in Vermont, and then as they move down the eastern seaboard, they sort of join the other swifts in other states. So by the time they get to states like South Carolina, you can see really large groups of swifts migrating and roosting. Let's go to the next slide. So aerial insectivores in general, which includes swallows and swifts and the whippoorwills and nightjars, are very sensitive to environmental change. And because of that, we are seeing pretty significant declines in this group of birds. So as you can see from this picture, it's from a recent report called 3 Billion Birds, which you might remember came out last fall, I think, where according to this report, 160 million aerial insectivores have been lost since 1970. And we've seen this huge decline in population, 32% decline in this population of this group of birds. So it's not completely known why this group of birds has experienced such a large decline, which happens to be probably the greatest of all the other songbirds. But in general, they are considered, because they're sensitive to environmental change, there may be a number of things playing a role here. It could be the increased effectiveness of insecticides. It could be related, which may be reducing their prey base. Could also be other chemicals causing declines in insect populations. It could be the timing of some of the hatches of the insects due to climate change being different from maybe the migratory patterns of these birds. Could also be habitat loss. So there's a number of factors that could play a role. In addition to this, we've also seen declines in the national survey called the North American Breeding Bird Survey, which has shown a 72% decline from 1966 to 2015 for just chimney swifts. So in general, this is a pretty dire situation for this group of birds, and it's concerning because the numbers are not improving, and we feel like there's a lot we should be doing to help these birds. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows a couple of statistics from just Vermont itself. Hopefully we'll get into some positive news here. It's kind of depressing to start out, but the graph on the upper left is from a report from the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, which did a study of forest birds and shows this overall decline of the aerial insectivores. So flycatchers, phoebes, peewees, swallows, all of those birds are part of this decline that you're seeing in that trend line from late 1980s to a few years ago. And similarly, in the breeding bird atlas that Vermont Center for Eco Studies put together, you can see that's just showing chimney swift change, percent change from the first atlas, which was in the mid 1980s, to the second, which was in the early 2000s, or around 2010. You can see the percent change. We saw a 26% change, decline in chimney swifts throughout the state, but the biggest declines were in the Chittenden Champlain Valley and northern Green Mountains, and then largest overall was in the Northeast Kingdom. So because of some of these trends, Vermont has considered chimney swift to be a species of greatest conservation need, which for those of you who are not familiar with the Vermont State Wildlife Action Plan, this is a plan that was put together by Vermont Fish and Wildlife as well as a number of other partners. And it outlines kind of the species of all different taxa that are considered to be of high conservation priority, and then develops, for those of greatest conservation need, has sort of developed specific goals in terms of what the needs are to determine how best to conserve some of these species. So the chimney swift is considered to be one of those species of greatest conservation need because of the declines we've seen in Vermont and throughout the range. They are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. So they are federally protected species, but that obviously is not doing enough to keep the populations from changing in a negative way. There's also a group called the Scientific Advisory Group, which there are numbers of various groups, birds, plants, herps, mammals. The bird group has determined that chimney swifts are a species of special concern. This is not a legal ranking, but it's kind of like a watch list that we should be keeping an eye on these birds and making sure that they don't get to the point where they are endangered in Vermont. And so for all these reasons, Vermont has, Fish and Wildlife has teamed up with Audubon Vermont to try to get a sense of what our population is like, where the birds are in the state, what some of the important habitats are, especially in some of the cities and towns, some of the important nesting and roosting habitats, and try to determine what we can do to make a difference for these species. All right, let's go to the next slide. So just for those of you who don't really know chimney swifts, this is what one looks like in the air. We call them a flying cigar. They look like a cigar with wings, and hopefully the sound will work. Ray, can you try? We've got a little chipping, there we go. And this is their characteristic sound that you hear when they're flying in the air, catching insects. It's like a little chitter. And even here in Huntington, where I live, I do hear them and see them. So we don't really know if chimney swifts are using the forests of Vermont again, now that we have a lot more forest land again. But we do know they're at least feeding over some of the forested habitat, and maybe they're nesting in the villages or in town. We don't really know, but they are relatively widespread throughout the state. Let's go to the next slide. So some cool facts about chimney swifts. They're really an important part of our ecosystem in Vermont, because one of the big things they do is to eat nearly 1/3 of their own weight in flying insects. And these can be mosquitoes, they could be black flies. So every day they eat a number of bugs that are flying in the air. A couple of other cool things is because they don't perch and can't perch, they fly quite a bit. So they're almost always in flight, except when they're on their nest or roosting at night, or taking care of young. And as I said, they can't sit on a perch because their feet are not designed for perching the way other songbirds are. They're only designed to cling to the surfaces of vertical surfaces, like of a wall of a chimney or some other surface. They can't cling to something that's metal, like a stovepipe, but they can certainly cling to a brick chimney or something wooden. They can actually sleep in flight, which is pretty amazing. So one study I read is that young swifts, after fledging, do not stop flying for their entire first year. So they are able to sleep in flight, and they are even able to bathe in flight. They just dip themselves in the water on the fly and shake the water off, and they've had their bath. So they have these pretty amazing adaptations, which make them pretty interesting birds. Let's go to the next slide. So there's definitely some interesting facts about chimney swifts. So I've been saying all along, nesting versus roosting, or nesting and roosting. These are two different aspects of a chimney swift's life cycle. So the nesting breeding season, a pair of swifts will choose a chimney, and only one pair will use that chimney to build its nest. It uses its saliva which has kind of glue-like from a gland under its tongue, to cement the nest to the chimney wall, or to a rock face, or inside of a tree hollow. Sometimes there's an unmated swift that will help the breeding pair rear the young, but in general, it's just one pair nesting in a chimney at a time. It takes about 2 weeks for those young to outgrow the nest, and they have to cling to the wall too until they can fly. And they'll even do this sometimes before their eyes are even open. So it's hard to see maybe in this picture, but those little bald babies' eyes are not open. They don't have feathers, but they may have to cling to the wall of the chimney before any of that starts to happen. So nest sites refer to the places where they choose to build their nest. And that usually happens in May here in Vermont, and then continues through July. The nest itself is like a half saucer shape, and it's made of twigs glued together. And the adults will break off twigs for the nest when they're flying by, something like a dead shrub or something like that. They only raise one brood of young per season, per breeding season. Once they leave the nest, they will start congregating into these, what we call roosting sites. So when roosting sites are really where the birds start to congregate when they're getting ready for migration. So you will see larger groups of birds flocking together and entering these roosting sites at dusk before they spend the night. They tend to start using these roosting sites when the weather cools off. It's a way for them to spend the night out of sight of predators. And some will even use a branch or something like that, but in general, it tends to be a chimney or some kind of urban structure. And you can see these large birds going in. And we have, in the next slide, a cool video of some swifts entering a roost site at dusk. Hopefully that'll work, Ray.
Hopefully.
You can hear the chittering. And they sort of form this funnel right before they go in. It's pretty cool to watch. Yeah, you can skip ahead, yeah.
Pause it.
Okay, great. So we're hoping that that's what we would see in a place like Morrill Hall, or we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. And I think, Ray, other than, that's all I have. If Ray, you want to go ahead and start talking about the work we're doing in Vermont. I didn't get into too much detail about what Vermont Fish and Wildlife has asked us to do, but I talked about it generally, and Ray can talk in more details and how we're doing some of the surveys, who can get involved, and some of the other details there.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. So for the Swift project and monitoring them, we really need your help in order to sort of get a sense of how many swifts are out there and where they're roosting and where they're nesting. So it's Audubon Vermont Fish and Wildlife, the Swifts, and you. So fun fact, this is an art piece done by a local artist, Katie Kennedy, and we have stickers that are available for purchase that support our Swift work. Just want to throw that out there. But so we need your help in monitoring the chimney swifts. As Margaret said, they are usually nesting in late May to early July. And so we've passed that point now, but we're looking to see where they're roosting right now. So from mid to late July, they'll start roosting. And then in August, that's when they'll start to, you'll see their number sort of drop off and they'll start to migrate. And so they are sort of widespread and not in dense populations. So we need your help to find where they're nesting and when they're roosting. So currently we're just looking for roosting sites. And so what we're going to have you, the best time to do that is during dusk in the evening. We just want you to go take an evening stroll in your neighborhood and see your favorite swift sighting area with your binoculars. And count the number that you see of the birds and as you hear them too. And then it'd be awesome if you can follow them until you actually see the chimney or structure that they are going into so that you can report the location. The way that we are recording these observations is just through eBird. So eBird is a really amazing application that's widespread for bird knowledge. It's an amazing community science project because anybody can sort of join on board. You can take notes in the field and you can submit online, or you can get the application and live track as you go. And so we have this really easy survey 10-step guide on our website. And so basically, if you go to our Chimney Swift page, it takes you right to this guide. It's pretty simple if you're familiar with eBird. The big thing is to make sure that you are implementing the project name, which is CHSW dash survey. And so that is really important so that we get notified about the information. And then you can take notes about where they're roosting and things like that. I'm not going to go through all the steps today because the website's really detailed and really awesome, and you can go through it on your own and go through it at your own pace. But that is what we're asking you to do. And so right now we're just looking for roosting. But as we're asking you to go out, we have developed a buddy program because we're recommending for you to be birding outside at dusk, which we know that birding in the outdoors is not equal for all of us, including Black birders, LGBTQIA birders, and female identifying birders, as well as birders with disabilities. People face additional barriers in being safe and accessing opportunities to participate in our community science work. And so inherently, just in general, the Swift work is at a sort of more dangerous time, asking you to go out at dusk. So we've created this buddy program, which pairs you with somebody in your area who either is requesting the need of a buddy, would like to be a buddy, or just wants to help out. And so we'll pair people as people start to sign up with people in their area to go out. And so that link is down there below. That's how you sign up. And then I will get an email and I'll reach out to you. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions. And then this year, things are a little bit different, obviously, because of COVID-19. So if you are joining us and you decide to participate as a buddy, we are asking that you follow the CDC guidelines with COVID-19. So only go out with people in your household, drive with them in the car if they are from your household, stay 6 feet away from them and wearing a cloth mask, as well as making sure that you're feeling healthy enough to go out before going out with your birding buddy, and then washing your hands more than 20 seconds, we all know this, and then avoiding touching surfaces, which includes sharing binoculars. So bringing your own field guide and binoculars. If you don't have a field guide, but you have a smartphone, you can download the Audubon app. It's a really great field guide that can help you. And so, yeah, keeping those things to yourself is definitely important during COVID this year. So some known possible roosting sites in Burlington currently are at UVM, the Morrill Hall, as well as the Moran plant that's down by the waterfront near the bike path, and then the Gap on Church Street, which is basically the top of Church Street where that crosswalk is across from the church. That building up there has a chimney. And so those are some places that we know of in Burlington. So we've been doing this work in Burlington. We've been doing more outreach since last year. But we are hoping to get people all over the state of Vermont monitoring swifts because they are throughout the state and we want to see where they are at in their entirety. But those are just a few places if you are in the Burlington area that you could check out to get started. Another way that you can be involved is Audubon has been working with the University of Vermont's NR 206 class for the last year. We worked with them to build a chimney swift tower. So the first semester sort of came together and built most of the tower, and then the second semester got the monitoring plan in place, and we were going to put the tower up, but then COVID hit, so we were at a loss for meeting in public and getting that up. But we will be putting a chimney swift tower up at Oak Ledge as soon as groups of people are able to get together and make that happen. Obviously, right now, it's sort of we're in August, so it's not a priority, but for next year, we will have that tower up for the swifts, and hopefully as time goes on, we'll be able to monitor that tower and see if it's successful, so that is really, really exciting. But the reason why we are building towers, like Margaret said, is historically chimney swifts nested in hollow trees, and the forest still has hollow trees, but not as many as swifts need to be accommodated, because as Margaret said, when they're nesting in just that one nesting pair is in one hollow tree or one chimney. So it takes a lot of space for them. And so also there was a huge habitat loss in Vermont but things are pretty good now in the forests. But so chimneys have sort of shifted and capitalized on human development. And so they are nesting in chimneys, but as time has gone on and there's more modernization in heating appliances, as well as people are using metal chimneys and people are capping their chimneys so that things don't get into their chimneys, we are making it harder and harder for them to have a space to nest and roost. So it's really important to build these chimney swift towers. They are creating the habitat that they need for them. And so this year, the NR206 students, since they didn't put the tower in the ground, they ended up writing a sort of manual about how to make a chimney swift tower. And that is a resource that we have and would love to get people building towers. So if you're interested in building a tower, we would love to connect with you. You can email me and we can start corresponding, and sort of, it would be awesome if we could, throughout the entire state of Vermont, get towers up everywhere, because that habitat is really important. So feel free to reach out to me if you are interested in building a tower as well, and I can help you in that process. But other things that you can do, which is less of a building commitment, one is definitely monitor. We need your help monitoring, but you can keep your masonry or clay flue tile chimney tops open and the dampers closed from March through October to provide that space for them to nest and for them to roost. If you have your chimney cleaned, do it in early March before chimney swifts return from their winter homes in South America. Metal chimneys should be permanently capped to prevent birds and other wildlife from coming in and being trapped. I've heard many stories about this happening. And then, like I said before, let us know if you're interested in building towers in your area, because we would love to have that happen. So that's sort of an overview between Margaret and I, and now we'd love to open it up to questions. So I could stop sharing my screen. Margaret and I will both be able to answer questions for you if you have any questions, or if questions didn't get answered in the chat.
Yeah, so Gwen or Sarah, can you let us know if there's some questions that we need to help answer for the group?
Yeah, we got two interesting questions. The first one was from Sabina, and the question is, any thoughts on why there was a 14% increase in the Taconic Mountains when all the other areas had decreases?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Conics is a pretty small proportion of the swifts in Vermont, so it may just be that a little bit of an outlier that we had more chimney swifts in that particular area compared to the last time it was checked. It could also be changes in development from the 80s to 10 years ago, or probably 7 or 8 years ago when the second atlas was done. So maybe a number of factors, but I don't know for sure. We could look at the Breeding Bird Atlas book. I can look at that and let you know, Sabina, what I find out. I don't have it at my fingertips right now.
Great, thanks, Margaret. And Amy was wondering, is there an ideal location or habitat to put up a swift tower?
Well, not so. When we chose the Oak Ledge spot, we were sort of thinking, one, we wanted people to know about the swifts, and so we wanted to put it in a place where it would get high visibility, but as well as the fact that we knew that they were nesting at the Moran plant, which is not that far off, so it was sort of near an area where they were nesting and roosting. Something to keep in mind if you're going to put up a chimney swift tower is to be mindful of your surrounding environments. So not putting a chimney swift tower right next to a huge glass window is a really important thing. Obviously, that would be not safe for the chimney swifts. And so keeping it in a really open area, at least 25 feet from trees, so it can be easily located by swifts, as well as just thinking about if you do see swifts in your area and you have a big backyard or something like that, that would be a great spot. So thinking about not just putting it randomly and hoping that they'll take to it, but finding where they're at and then finding a suitable place, keeping those other things in consideration.
Yeah, the only other tower in Vermont that I know about is at North Branch Nature Center. And I haven't heard if it's been used this year. There are some techniques for drawing chimney swifts in if they don't find the tower right away. I can't remember those at the top of my head, but it may be like playing the sounds or something to attract them to the tower. So I don't think you'd want to put it in the middle of the forest, but you'd certainly, there are a lot of options where we could put them throughout the state.
And are there particular other habitat? You know, I was just thinking about the chimney swifts being aerial insectivores. So, you know, places where they would be likely to find a good population of insects to feed on. The other thing I was thinking of.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we could certainly, the more pollinator plants we have around, the better the habitat will be for chimney swifts. So they can eat the pollinators. And then maybe put a tower up.
And I just saw a comment from Amy saying that they're going to give it a try down at the Dead Creek Visitor Center. So that's wonderful. And if you need, Ray's done a lot of research on how to build those towers. And so if you want to reach out to Ray, I'm sure she could help you.
I would love to. That's awesome.
There's a guidebook that's kind of the Bible of chimney swift tower building. We can certainly share that with you, Amy.
That about covers the questions I've gotten so far. I don't know if folks who are on the call still have some lingering questions. Feel free to, I mean, you could turn your mic off if you want and ask Ray and Margaret directly if you'd like.
Well, this is Amy, so I'm going to jump in and ask a question. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this great information. I do have a question. I know that there are chimney swifts at the Heinsberg Elementary School because I live across the street from it and I see them all the time. But I see about 7 or 8 of them typically, and so I guess I'm a little confused about why I'm seeing 7 or 8 of them when at the time when they should be nesting. I guess so. I'm confused about the nesting versus the roosting as far as why I'm seeing so many during a nesting period. Can you clarify that?
I can try to clarify. I don't know really. I'm guessing that they're foraging together, but they're not actually using the same chimney, you know, for nesting. So maybe they're coming out and foraging in groups. But then going back down into their individual chimneys to raise young. Because there's probably more than one site in Heinsberg that they're using, I would think, when I think about the town there. And so maybe we just don't know, other than the, you know, in addition to the high school, what other sites are being used. It could just be somebody's house.
Okay.
Ray or Gwen or Sarah have any other thoughts on that?
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, so they're just sneaky.
Yeah, I've been looking in my neighborhood and I've never seen, like, I see the chimney swifts all the time. I was pretty obsessed last summer and I never saw them going into any chimneys. They don't want you to, like, why would they, you know, they don't want potential predators to see where they're nesting. But this time of year they would be roosting, right, Margaret? If you're seeing 7 or 8.
Starting to, I don't know. I think they're just starting to gather in groups. I mean, it hasn't gotten cold, like they haven't had that trigger. But I'm guessing they've got fledglings flying around at this point. So maybe what we're seeing are family groups when we're seeing groups out at this point. But it won't be long before they start getting that kind of environmental cue to get them going into roost sites.
And then we have another question from Sabina asking, are the swifts hunting higher in the air than swallows?
I think so. That's my sense, but I don't know. When I see swifts, they're pretty high, and when swallows are often low over fields. But Gwen, I don't know, when you see them, are you seeing any difference? Or are you only seeing swifts?
Yeah, I'm not really seeing very many swallows when I'm looking at them, and they're way, way up high. They're higher than most other birds. So yeah, I do kind of get the impression that they are a little higher than the swifts.
Yeah, I mean, I usually cue into them when I hear them rather than looking for them.
Yep.
And they are usually pretty high.
So we had a question in Facebook Live here from Erin at Birds of Vermont Museum. And her question is, do you know where they roost in Bristol, around the village in Bristol? Had you had any sightings?
I don't off the top of my head. People have reported birds in Bristol, and I don't know if they've reported any roosting sites. I wouldn't be surprised if the town hall is a roosting site or whatever that building is on by the main street, just after you go through the light on the left as you're going towards Lake Champlain or whatever, if you're going west. But I'd have to look at our eBird sightings and let you know. Not sure.
Bridget has an answer for us from the Breeding Bird Atlas, and she quotes, aggregations of birds near large chimneys during the summer may be non-breeding individuals. So that's interesting to see.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget.
I'm kind of curious from the folks who are here, if you have participated in the survey, if you've submitted your sightings, or if you just would like to share with us what you're seeing in your community right now. And you're welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself if you have something to share.
Hi, I live in Saxons River, and I live in the Warner Center, which is the old girls' Kernhattan. And there are, it's old brick buildings from when 1800s or so, and lots of swifts around here. I've never tried to count them because they fly so quickly. So that's going to be an interesting exercise. But yeah, I'm going to see if I can see where they roost.
Great, thanks. I know it's been really hard for us to find pictures of swifts because they move so quickly. So yeah, they do move fast.
Hey, so this is Bridget up in St. Albans. Hi, you guys. Huzzah for Chimney Swifts. I have been hanging out at the St. Albans parking garage the past couple of years on the top floor, which is like great viewing. I too have not found like where they go in, like whether it's breeding or roosting. And during the summer months, it's anywhere between 6 and 8. I think I've had a couple of eBird reports last year, just started to get on it. This season, I'm a little late to the breeding season. But the largest number that I've seen at any one time was about 40 of them, and tried to stay up and track them, but was unsuccessful. So I think St. Albans might be ripe for a tower. I'd like to see if we can figure out where they're actually roosting, though, as well.
You get a bunch of people on bikes and start swift biking.
Yeah, with like badass helmets and the stickers on the side, right?
That's what I
going
imagine.
out. There you go.
You can have like Swift survey flags off your bike.
And wings.
And wings.
Just to help. Maybe a cape, who knows?
As long as it doesn't get tangled in the spokes.
Short cape.
Short cape. Deputy, what have you been seeing for the swifts in Montpelier?
I have been seeing swifts. I can see them from my house actually, because I'm up on almost at Town Hill Road. My guess, I'm wondering if they're around the Lane Street apartments, which are old brick buildings right on the river, and the middle school. So that is where I'm going to go investigate. But I see them mostly there following, like right along the North Branch River and those old brick buildings.
we should just send everybody out as soon as the call's done. Just your assignment is to go up, look out the skies, and put an eBird report in.
Yeah, it's perfect time of night. It's a nice night to be out because it's so hot.
This is Debbie again. I have a question. So if we sign up to be a birding buddy, when will we hear if we have someone to go birding with us?
We currently have, I think, 7 people signed up. It really is just if somebody is in your area. So I just am checking constantly, and when somebody signs up that's in your area, you get a buddy.
So I'm seeing we have a question on Facebook Live here from Martine. And Martine says, hi, I've noticed that there are many fewer bugs on my windshield, almost none this year, versus having to stop the car and clean the windshield a few years ago. Is this affecting the way the birds have access to food? And I've noticed the same thing myself.
Yeah, I would imagine it probably is. I mean, this is a really dry year, so a lot fewer bugs in general. Last year was really wet, and the black flies and mosquitoes were really bad. But I think it's all just part of this larger problem that we're seeing in general of just fewer bugs, strange climate happenings, and all of that is affecting how the birds can make their living. So unfortunately, hard to know. We don't have the science to say that there are fewer bugs in general. And just 1 year isn't maybe going to make it give us a statement about any trends, but I do think the dry weather's probably had an impact on the number of bugs that hit your windshield.
Then we have another question here from Amy. Do chimney swifts have a preference for specific size or suite of insects that they eat?
I think, well, they're pretty small birds, so they don't eat anything huge. But I don't know. I mean, they will eat mosquitoes.
Oop, Margaret, you got muted in the middle of your answer.
Sorry. I don't think, because of their size, I don't think they take anything huge. So, you know, a mosquito, black fly, that kind of thing. I don't think they're going to take a dragonfly. I don't know if you know more, Ray or Gwen, about their dietary habits.
I think that they're just eating sort of what's popping up, like the most, as insects bloom, like fish feeding on the water, they're the same. Like it's their most popular blooms, stoneflies, mayflies, all the airborne creatures that are just like all stuck in one place trying to breed.
Yeah, and and the ones that are up high out at dusk is when they do a lot of feeding, but they also feed during the day too.
Yeah.
And I saw a follow-up comment here on Facebook from Martine saying, I've heard that there is also spraying pesticides to keep the mosquitoes at bay, saying that she's shocked that we would spray in Vermont. So definitely pesticide use is also another impact on insect populations.
Yes, that's a big one. And especially during their whole migration, you know, not just Vermont, but everywhere along the eastern coast. When they leave Vermont on their way, they need to feed along the way, and the more pesticides and the fewer insects they have, the harder it is for them to maintain the energy they need to make that long journey.
Any good Swift stories to wrap up?
I have a couple from when I worked at Vins a long time ago. We we used to get nestlings, like as I said, they sometimes grow out of their nest before they can fly or even see. We used to get nestlings that had fallen down to the bottom of people's chimneys. And we would have to take care of them because I think the parents, maybe there was no way to put them back in the nest, and the parents were going to come to the bottom of the chimney to take care of them. So we would have to take care of these little baby swifts, which had to hang on something vertical. So we had netting, not like, it was almost like a mesh that we would hang on a side of a cage, and they would cling to that. And we'd have to feed them like every 20 minutes of a mash of mashed up insects, mealworms and things like that. But they were incredibly cute, but at the same time they were incredibly loud. Like they were constantly begging, and you hear that chittering noise of the adults, and you can think of that as just even at a faster pace and higher pitch. But they just needed to eat nonstop in order to grow up, and then they would learn how to fly, and eventually we would hold out a stick with a bug on it or something on it, and they would fly and catch that, and then eventually they would learn how to hunt bugs on their own. It was amazing. So
we have another question in our chat from Susan. What about the aerial spraying for mosquitoes by the various mosquito control districts around the state?
well, I can't imagine it's good for chimney swifts or any bird, but I don't know if it's ever been documented that that particular thing is affecting populations, at least in Vermont, because there are so many other bugs around here. So my hope is that there are other bugs for them to eat if the mosquitoes are dying.
See, I had a question here in Facebook again, which was, is there a mailing list where we can be informed about these issues and be advocates by writing to our legislatures? Excellent question. And I have a link here if you'd like to join our Audubon Activist Network. I just posted the link in the chat, and we would love to have you join. And there's a lot of different legislative, both at the national and in the Vermont level, that we ask Audubon members to support us, and our voice is really heard. David Mears was just talking about, you might have heard about our Migratory Bird Treaty Act legislation here in Vermont is a backstop to the rules not being enforced at the federal level, and that is making its way through the legislature. And we asked from our Audubon Activist Network to contact legislators, and boy, everybody showed up. And David was saying that you just like the bird people, they're just all over us. So we'd love to have you join our network. And that link is right in the chat. Let's see here. And there was another question in Facebook here from Samantha. I've never heard of a swift. What do they look like? And are they in southern New Hampshire as well? And I'll post the link to our Swift page in Facebook here. And yes, they are in southern New Hampshire as well.
Yeah, they're not a colorful bird, but they've got a lot of unique characteristics. That's from the Facebook side right now.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thanks. Sarah, we have anything else you think?
We're about wrapped up here with questions as well. Thanks everybody for such thoughtful questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and feel free to stay in touch. Definitely report your sightings if you go out and about in the next few weeks, and certainly check our website for instructions if you need help with eBird, or you can always email us as well.
Yeah, and one last thing, if you are all about Swifts and want to support the Swift work that we're doing, we have a page that I'll put in the chat box where you can donate to our Swift program, and that really helps out the work that we're doing to keep this funded. Obviously, this is a weird time, but if you have the means, we definitely appreciate it.
And there's a really cool sticker.
Yeah,
That's right. Very cool. Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Good night.